Hi, this is Jason Nickleby, Coordinator of Officials with the Minnesota State High School League, and this is Basketball Officiating Training Tape number 7. We're going to take a look at another 8 plays today, again looking at mechanics and positioning and our philosophy in handling these types of plays in our games. So we're doing a great job. Keep it up. Thanks for your diligence. Stay safe and healthy. Again, not picking any one player, coach, official, crew, team, just trying to take a look at these plays and piece together mechanics and philosophy and positioning to get better in our games as we move through the season. So with that, let's take a look at some plays. On this play, I want to talk primary coverage area, our philosophy and mechanics, and putting those all together. So on this particular play, we come down in transition, and let's take a look at our initial positioning. We have the center far side, moves to C space. I like that. The lead initiates a rotation, anticipating that player will come across to that block to get open. So we're in a good position to view this play. I would say if the lead makes it all the way over, they would be the primary for this play in the paint. But if they're not quite all the way over, the lead's almost there, it would be the C's primary area. But for the most part, if we can let lead take this play, that would be best. And I think we anticipate this one a little bit because the defender goes from A to B and takes a big swipe. But if you slow it down, it does appear that she jumps from A to A and is clean up top. And based on that, I would say that this is a clean block. So just don't anticipate because they're coming from a distance or they take a big swipe that there is contact. And notice this game is in overtime. Not that we want to change what we do during the course of the game, but in overtime especially, we want to make sure that the fouls we get are clear fouls, definite ones that need to be called, and we need to stick to our primary coverage areas and get those particular plays, because once we get to this point of the game, the likelihood of a player fouling out on a play like this becomes much higher, of course. So we want to make sure that they're good ones at this late stage of a game. From a philosophy standpoint, I hear this quite a bit where officials in pre-games will say, well, we just want to get it right. Or if you see something in front of me, come and get it. Well, that doesn't really work from a number of fronts, because as we've discussed many times in previous tapes, that for the most part, the official who is the closest and in their primary coverage area is going to get calls and non-calls correct more often than officials coming from another part of the court to take a call. So unless it's a non-basketball play, we really should be letting the primary coverage official make calls and non-calls, and we should not be coming from other parts of the court to pick up plays. This leads to challenges with that official or those officials in that game and also in later games as it relates to their development. So we don't need to come and get plays for other officials. We have our own plays to officiate in our primary coverage area. We've talked about that a number of times this year, that we have officials that are coming from a long distance to pick up plays. And when we do that, many times we are not correct in our ruling because the official who's closest or in their primary coverage area had a really good look at it and no-called it for a reason. And if they were incorrect in their judgment, then that's fine. We need to let them live and die with the plays in their primary coverage areas, and we shouldn't be officiating the whole court as our primary. So we're seeing too much of that, and our accuracy diminishes. So really defer to the primary coverage official. Let's try to move away from we're just trying to get it right or call things in front of me. No, you're a good official. You're going to make the calls in your area because you're a good official, and I'm going to trust you. So partner trust, call your area to the best of your ability, really work your primary hard, very slow in your secondary. And you'll find that if you slow down your secondary, that many times your partner will ultimately put air in the whistle on plays that they should. So just something to think about, as it relates to our mechanics, our primary coverage areas, and then philosophy, during the game and then late in the game as well. On this play, let's talk secondary defenders, restricted area, rule language, verticality, and our mechanics. So first, I like our positioning. We could work a little bit lower as trail, but lead, we're mirroring the ball, and that's good. We have a drive to the basket down the lane line, and we subsequently have a blocking foul called on the secondary defender. So let's talk about restricted area rule language, secondary defenders, etc. And remember, when we have a secondary defender play in the paint, that's going to be the lead's primary coverage area, regardless of which side of the paint it's on. If it is involving a secondary defender, that's going to be the lead's primary. Okay, now let's talk about the secondary defender and what they can and can't do and what they need to do to avoid being called for a restricted area blocking foul. If they are a secondary defender and they establish initial legal guarding position in the restricted area, they cannot remain grounded for the purpose of taking a charge. And if you see here, the secondary defender rises vertically, which she can do to avoid being called for a restricted area blocking foul. Once she leaves the ground, this becomes a regular block charge play. It is not a restricted area play any longer, and we need to judge the contact on verticality, whether she moves into the shooter or not, because remember, she is allowed to maintain her vertical space by jumping and rising vertically. We can't jump from A to B. We can go from A to A, and we're okay. All right. In this play, secondary defender comes over, establishes initial legal guarding position in the restricted area, rises vertically, and then there's contact with the shooter, and she's called for a foul. This is not a foul. This is not a blocking foul we want called. This should be a no call. The defender has not done anything wrong in this particular play. She rises vertically, and she is allowed to do that. So let's not penalize defenders when they play legal defense and the contact is initiated by the offensive player. This should be no called in this particular situation. And then the last part is our spot mechanics. Remember, we're not having a fist in the air and then signaling a half block signal with our other arm. If we do call it, signal the foul with a fist, then signal the block, signal 2 shots, throw in, whatever it might be, and then go around players, hustle out to report at the table. So just remember what secondary defenders can and can't do as it relates to legal guarding position in the restricted area. On this play, let's talk primary court coverages, positioning, and who has what as this play develops. So we see that the lead rotates to table side. Then as the ball comes back to the other side of the court, the lead subsequently initiates another rotation and calls a foul. So we really shouldn't initiate a rotation at this point, leads, because the ball has barely crossed that lane line extended, and we have post players on both sides, so we really should just close down on a play like this and not initiate a rotation. And you see the center is working lower and continues to work lower to officiate this play, which is proper mechanics, because we want to get in a position where we can see this play start, develop, and finish, because remember, this play is in the center's primary coverage area. So this is the center's primary coverage, and this is the center's play. And leads, if we do initiate a rotation, as we do here, the only way we can get involved in this play is if we get all the way over to the other lane line and get stationary at the time of contact or potential contact that we have to rule on. Otherwise, we should just defer to the center on this, because if you look at this closely, the defender, similar to the last two plays, maintains legal guarding position, rises vertically, and is subsequently called for foul. And we're pinning fouls on defensive players who maintain legal guarding position legally, and the offense is the one that is creating the contact, and we are putting them at the line. And it's not fair to the defenders if we're giving them this type of play. So make sure that we defer again to the primary covering official. They usually have a great look at it, and as you see here, the C works lower, is in really good position to officiate this play. No calls it, but then the lead during the course of a rotation puts air in the whistle on this play. And also keep in mind it's very early in the first half, and so we've kind of established that we're going to call this type of contact as a foul, which is not illegal contact. So we just don't want to give that first impression, to begin our game by putting air in the whistle on a play where there isn't a foul. So doesn't mean we don't get the obvious ones. We should in our primary coverage areas, but really see what the defender has done, see if they maintain legal guarding position all the way. And the only way we really can see whether they maintain that legal guarding position is if we were on that side of the court to begin with, which we really shouldn't do in a play like this because it happens so quickly. The ball doesn't get to that side of the court. So as leads, we should just close down a step and stop. And then we're going to officiate anything that happens on our side of the paint, and on the other side of the paint with the line drawn down the middle is going to be the center's primary coverage. And in this particular case, the center continues to work lower to get a good view of this, and they really should be trusted to officiate this play to its completion. So to wrap up, leads, don't initiate a rotation if it gets dumped down this fast. Just close down and stop, and trust your center to officiate this because it's the only matchup they have. We really should initiate rotations when we have many players on one side of the court, and we need to help out our fellow official. In this particular case, we just have that one matchup. It happens so quickly, so just close down and allow the center to take this play. And we want to see the play start, develop, and finish, which means we need to see how the defender established initial legal guarding position. And if we didn't see that, then we really can't get involved in the play, and we should defer to our crewmates who watch the play from the beginning all the way to the end. On this play, let's talk front court positioning and mechanics. Then we'll talk a little bit about traveling. So you see we have a traveling violation called on this play by the trail, but let's start at the beginning of the play with our mechanics. Leads in a good spot, ball goes below the free throw line extended, initiates a rotation. That's exactly what we should do. The center is now working low, which is great. As he moves into position when the center initiates the transition. And then the trail does react accordingly. But remember, trails, if we have a matchup, we shouldn't leave that spot. Just stay there and officiate the matchup. And what I would recommend on that initial matchup that's out there on the wing, I would take a step beneath that matchup so that you can see space. And that way, when the ball gets thrown back out to the top of the key, you don't have to move. You just shift your vision to look at that matchup at the top of the key. So you don't have to physically move in this case. I like the initial movement here. Then I would take a step below that matchup there and then look out at the matchup at the top of the key. So just a small thing that will assist with seeing space and seeing who initiates contact or not. So good job of initiating a rotation, going to our spots, picking up our initial matchups. So that's all very good mechanically. And then from a traveling perspective, you'll see here that if we slow it down, that the player at the top of the key She catches it with both feet on the floor, which means she can pick either foot to be her pivot foot. She picks up her left foot very slightly and puts it back down, which means her right foot is the pivot foot. She subsequently takes a step with the pivot foot and then again with the non-pivot foot to begin a dribble. And remember that picking up your dribble, or starting a dribble rather, and picking up your pivot foot to start a dribble is more restrictive on traveling than it is for attempting a shot or a pass. So if you pick up your pivot foot to start a dribble, it's a traveling violation, and that's what we have here, and this is properly called by the trail. On this play, we have a transition play where the ball handler goes right to the basket and is subsequently fouled as she's shooting. So let's talk about our coverage, our mechanics, and then talk a little bit about rules on this particular play. So in transition, if the trail has not settled in the front court, settled in their position, then this would be the center's primary coverage area. If we get where the trail is settled in the front court, it would be the trail's primary coverage because it goes down that semicircle at the top of the lane there. And then as we get further into the lane, we're going towards the primary coverage of the lead. But in this particular case, the trail is not settled in the front court, and therefore this would be the center's primary responsibility. So well done here by the center picking up this action. This is the center's primary. A couple things mechanically. Remember our spot mechanics. Signal a foul by a fist in the air, signal the infraction, which we do as a block, and then the number of shots or the throw-in location, whatever we happen to do, and then hustle over to the reporting area, which is what we do in this case. So well done. Just something to think about. Our spot mechanics, our communication with our partners and the players and coaches about what's going on. And so it's key to work on our spot mechanics because it helps to slow us down and process what we saw. Another piece here is when we have a foul, like in this situation, let's take a step or two towards the action. Let's close down towards the action. There's nothing going on in this particular case, but sometimes we get players that are upset with each other and so forth, and we want to have a presence. So maybe take a step or two towards the action on a play like this. And then from a rules perspective, the defender obtains legal guarding position, 2 feet on the floor, facing her opponent. And the question is, does she maintain it legally? And in this particular case, the ball handler gets her head and shoulders past the torso of the defender, which now means any contact that's initiated by the defender would be subject to a foul. And in this particular case, she ends up undercutting her legs a little bit, not a ton, but she does run right into her hip as she's shooting and is properly called for a foul. So we need to pick up the defender. Do they establish legal guarding position? Do they maintain it legally? And if not, and contact is made, then they are subject to a foul. In this particular case, a shooting foul is the proper ruling. So well done mechanically, coverage, and rules-wise by the crew on this play. On this play, let's talk front court coverage, some traveling, and rules pieces for this play. So you'll see on this play that we have a ball handler at the top of the key in the semicircle there, and this is the trail's primary responsibility to officiate plays in that area, and the trail does here. And I like the fact that the trail is working low, stationary at the time of the violation that's called, and then we have good spot mechanics. So well done here by the trail, good front court coverage, knowing our primary coverage area and sticking with it, and then good spot mechanics. We stop the clock, signal travel, indicate the throw-in spot, which is also properly done. Remember, if we have a violation in the semicircle all the way in the lane, it's going to be down on the end line for the throw-in. So this is properly done by the trail on this play. Now, from a traveling perspective, we'll slow it down. You'll see that when the ball handler picks up the dribble, her left foot is the pivot foot, and then she kind of does a hop step jump to the left a little bit, just slightly, but does pick it up, put it back down before beginning a shot attempt. So therefore, this is a proper call for a traveling violation and is overall very well done mechanically, coverage, and rules-wise for both traveling and the throw-in location. So well done by the trail and the crew on this play. On this one, I want to discuss our front court coverage, some rules and judgment pieces. So you'll see that we have a dribble drive to the basket. She encounters a secondary defender. There's some contact, and she loses the ball. And this is just a really well officiated play by the crew. So let's start mechanically in coverage. So trail working low, can see space. We're beneath the 28-foot line, which is great. And then we're stationary to take in this play. All three officials are stationary, officiating their primary coverage responsibilities. And this secondary defender is in the lead's primary area. He's nice and deep, has a good perspective of this play, and judges this properly. And you'll see that the secondary defender, it's not a arc play, it's just a regular block charge type judgment. And you have to see, does she obtain legal guarding position prior to contact, prior to a shooter leaving the ground, and in this case she does, and she's allowed to play proper legal defense, and there's contact, and that's not a foul, and that's well done by the crew. Not all contact is a foul. We're looking for illegal contact, and the only way we're going to have a legal contact in a play like this is if that secondary defender does not obtain legal guarding position at the time of contact. And in this particular case, she does. She maintains her vertical space, and there is contact, but that is legal. If anything, if we have any displacement on a play like this, if anything, it's going to be an offensive foul. So I don't like this play for an offensive foul. I think no call is the proper judgment, and that's what we do here. And we just have really outstanding mechanics, coverage, patient whistle, rules knowledge, just well done by the crew on this play. This is exactly how we want this play officiated. On this play, let's talk about offensive initiated contact and just processing what we see, pulling it all together from a rules, judgment, philosophy piece, to make sure that we get plays like this correct. So you'll see that we have a weave, handoff, dribble drive into the middle of the paint, and there's some contact initiated by the offensive player with a legal defender, and the question is this enough for an offensive foul? And we can get really fooled on a play like this where we see that momentum or the defensive player looking like they're getting displaced when it's just the momentum taking them that way and not really being displaced by the offensive player. So in this particular case, we don't see that overt act by the offensive player. They're not pushing through. They don't drop a shoulder. There's not an extension of the arm. The momentum of the defensive player with some slight offensive initiated contact sends the defender backwards, but this is not enough for an offensive foul. It's just a drop step shot, and we can get fooled on plays like this where we see that defender go flying and we think, well, they were put there by the offensive player, but we need to make sure that, one, we take a look at the defensive player for legal guarding position. Do they maintain it legally and so forth? And then secondly, we need to take a look at the offensive player and see if they initiate the contact, and if so, does it rise to the level of an offensive foul? In this particular case, it does not. And from a coverage perspective, this is kind of a tough play coverage-wise, but I think the C would have the best look at it, and we call it properly. And I just wanted to point out this play as an example of making sure we see all parts of the play. The defender, do they establish legal guarding position? Do they maintain it legally? Who's responsible for the contact? Is there clear displacement? and pulling all those pieces together to come up with an accurate ruling, because many times we do pin offensive players for fouls on a play like this because it looks bad. And as a reminder, ugly is not illegal. We need to make sure that we pull all the pieces of legal guarding position, displacement, offensive initiated contact, and so forth together to get proper rulings. And we do on this play, so it's well done by the crew coverage-wise and judgment to not put a foul on the offensive player on this play. On this play, we have a really good example of not anticipating what the call is going to be, and we have nice mechanics and positioning. So we have a rebound, and you see that the girl in the dark uniform gets the rebound, and she happens to go over the top of the defensive player, but that's just incidental contact at that point. She gains possession. She goes over the top of the player without contact. Eventually, there is contact, but it's incidental in nature, and it's not enough for a foul. Many times we penalize players for being big or jumping higher or being more athletic. And in this case, she happens to muscle the offense for the rebound, doesn't do it illegally, doesn't displace players, gains possession in a legal manner. And then the second piece that I like, having a patient whistle and good judgment, is now the offensive player turns to shoot. The defensive players maintain their verticality, they maintain their vertical position, and have a clean block. We stop the clock, indicate a held ball signal. And so this is just really well done to have a patient whistle, not anticipate contact or pinning a foul on the defense because it looks bad, and first not pinning a foul on the offensive player because it looks bad. So just overall, excellent job of having a patient whistle on the rebounding action, and then we close down. We're in good position to view this, and then we properly call a held ball in this particular situation, allowing it to play out. It's a good block. We maintain their vertical space, and they are allowed to do that by rule, and we let the players do that in this particular case. So, good play to end on. Good mechanics and positioning, and then good patient whistle mechanics as far as not anticipating a foul, but being ready for the kind of play that can occur, and then ultimately coming up with a held ball in this play. So well done by the crew, mechanics, judgment, and patience. Okay, that will do it for training tape 7. Few more plays to consider, and mechanics and positioning philosophy, and hopefully we can pull those all together in our games this weekend and next week. And we'll have one more tape next week, and that will do it. But appreciate your diligence and commitment to working as hard as you can this year. Keep up the good work, stay healthy and safe, and we'll talk to you next week.